Welcome back to our video series on the Play framework using Scala. We left off last video with the beginnings of a login component, and our main component had an error that was saying it couldn't find login component. That actually had nothing to do with login component. That was because I hadn't put in the macro paradise in the build.sbt. As soon as I added that and reloaded the settings in SBT, this became happy. But the page still just says testing Slinky because up here that's all that we say. This should probably change to saying version 7 main component. And then if we refresh, we should get a compile over here. And indeed, then we get an empty display. And that is because right now our login component has a render that doesn't say anything. Perhaps if we just put the word login there, we can verify that that's actually what's displaying. There, okay. So clearly the login component is being displayed at this point, and we need our login page. So I have a div here. For the login component, we had this previously, and I theoretically could grab this and try to change it to make it work. But honestly, I'd rather just write it from scratch with Slinky here, because I think that it works. The autocomplete and the static type checking and whatnot kind of helps me on this. So we have an H2 that says login, and then a line break, and then we had username and password, each of which had input fields after them. So username as a string, and input backtick on the type is text. This is for our username. Its value is going to be bound to the login name, and on change we want to change that field. So rocket set state of state dot copy with the login name equal to dot target dot value. In an earlier video, I mentioned that it's much nicer to call state dot copy than it is to rebuild a whole state. This is definitely one of those situations where that makes sense. Because if I was rebuilding the whole state, I would have to pass in all 6 arguments here instead of just passing in the one that I am changing. So we have our input field and then a line break, and the same type of thing for our password. And in this case, I am willing to copy and paste. Password, its type, we're missing a comma. Its type is password. It's not going to be a login name. It is a login pass. We don't set the login name. We set login pass. Okay. You know what? That is enough stuff that I want to see that display. So I should be able to type in values here, and okay, that looks like we're definitely going in the right direction. Then we had a button that when we click it, we would do the login. Now this login though was one of the things that was passed in So in this case, actually, the login is going to do a fetch and communicate for us to the server to verify whether or not that happened. And if it did, then we have to tell our parent about it, and that needed to be passed in on props. Now, right now, we don't have any props here, but clearly we're going to need it. We have a do login, which is a function that probably takes something, either a username and or a user ID. What were we doing here? Actually, we just called do login with nothing on this one. So for the time being, we'll leave this as is and go ahead and put in our line break and then our button, whose text is going to say login, and whose on click is an event that, matching this, I'm going to write a separate function. And the reason is this has to go do a fetch call. It's going to be a little bit longer than what we had before, or than what I want to stick here inside of this code. So we'll call login, and that doesn't exist, of course. Def login. So when they click the login button, we need to send a message to the server saying that we want to do a validation. We wrote previously this fetch JSON so that we could do a fetch post, and it turns out that version 6 of this has code that does validation for us. We have this call right here that goes through and does things. Now, of course, what we're going to do is going to be a little bit different in our current version. We are going to do a fetch. We need that validate route. And so I believe we also need a CSRF token for this. But not all of the routes are going to be used by all of the components. So for example, login is going to use the CSRF and the validate route. I don't currently have an import for my DOM document. Let's grab that real quick. Okay. And we also do not currently have the import for HTML, so that it can easily get off the values from those. So the fetch post says that it doesn't have a serializer for the type that we are sending. Well, we need our another import so we can get JS dynamics. Oh, well, that's only if we're going to do this same stuff, which we're not. So I am going to replace those. This one actually just sets the message. This one's fairly easy for us to do, actually. Set state dot copy of login message equals login failed. Okay, and our post is still unhappy because it doesn't have a serializer for this data. In some ways, this is a weird error message because data actually exists inside of Slinky objects. If we were to pick some other name for this, make this maybe user data, then we'd get the more informative message, which is, oh, that doesn't exist here. And that's because we need to make a user data. So we have user data already inside of our models here, and it has serializers for it. We just don't have them visible here. So let's see, we don't really need that. So our user data needs to have a state.login name and a state.login pass. And we need to have the serializers. So we'll go ahead and do an import of, I think, just reads and writes under models. Import, not the one we wanted. Models dot reads and writes dot underscore, and we need the import models user data. Okay, and we need an execution context, and I will define that up here. Let's put it right about here. Implicit val ec equals Scala dot concurrent dot execution context dot global. And now this code is compiling. This one is unhappy because we haven't passed in a function yet. We can write one real quick that would simply change the state and say that we are logged in. So set state to logged in equals true. Oh, state.copy. Lost one layer there. Okay. I have to admit, as I'm typing this, there's already a part of me that's like, you know what? I don't think this is sufficient information because we really need to know something about the user so that when we send stuff to the, or actually no, that's part of our session, and that's why this client doesn't use it. You actually don't know who you are after you log in. It's all handled by the session variables. Okay, so just having the Boolean to tell us what we are viewing is sufficient. So where are we now? So we are making this call. Everything compiles. So let's come over here and let's do a refresh. Make sure that it pops up the way it's supposed to. Indeed. And actually I'm going to do an invalid login first. Okay. I didn't see a message on that. Oh, and yeah. So I believe that is a happy login. Nothing's happening though. So we'll come back in the next video and we'll get it so that our login works and at least takes us to another view so that we can verify that we're hitting the database and everything is going through okay.